Get ready because today we're going to talk about cosmic horror and hopefully not lose our minds in the process. By the way, my name is Brandon McNulty. I'm the author of Bad Parts, also the author of Entry Wounds, and welcome to my writing channel. Several of my subscribers requested a video on cosmic horror, so I thought we'd look at that today. And what we'll do, we'll define what cosmic horror is, then we'll discuss its key elements, and I'll wrap up the video with some tips for writing stories within this subgenre. And here's your spoiler warning for today. The stories in red have the heaviest spoilers. Alright, now let's start off by answering the question, what is cosmic horror? And sometimes the definition can get really strict and elaborate, but I'm going to give you a simplified version here. And we'll say that it's a horror subgenre that explores how humans are powerless and insignificant within the grand scheme of the universe. And it deals with the unknown, the unexplainable, and cosmic forces beyond human control. And oftentimes these stories involve bizarre creatures and powerful ancient beings, and these types of stories aim to create a sense of dread and despair over humanity's place in a hostile universe. And one last thing I want to point out here is that cosmic horror is also known as Lovecraftian horror. And this of course refers to H.P. Lovecraft. He was an influential horror writer from the early 1900s, and he created some of the most iconic stories within the subgenre. He popularized the subgenre, and his name as a result is often synonymous with it. Alright, now let's talk about the key elements of cosmic horror. And there are a bunch of these, but we'll focus on 5 today. The first one is themes of existential dread and human insignificance. And when we talk about existential dread, we're talking about the deep and unnerving feeling that comes from thinking about big questions like the meaning of life, our purpose in the world, and our mortality. Cosmic horror explores these fears and examines how humanity is small, insignificant, and fragile within the grand scheme of the universe. For example, in the movie The Thing, a research team has to battle against an alien shapeshifter that has survived beneath the ice in Antarctica for thousands of years. This thing could wipe out humanity if it reaches civilization, and it's scary to think that it all starts with just one of these creatures. And that brings us to our second key element, cosmic creatures or entities. And this is the fun part. These stories often contain powerful, mysterious beings that exist beyond human understanding. And since they come from other worlds and other dimensions, these beings can be difficult or even impossible to describe. And if you're writing one of these stories, you may want to have your narrator describe only certain parts of the creature rather than the whole. And this will allow your audience to fill in the blanks with their imagination, with their worst fears. And if you're writing for a visual medium, you may want to use darkness or fog to hide parts of the monster. Now that being said, you don't have to use monsters. You can also use cosmic entities, like in the story Color Out of Space. This is about a family whose lives are disrupted when a meteorite strikes their property, and it releases an unnatural color that mutates anything around it. And there's also a similar situation in the manga series Uzumaki, in which a small town is cursed by spirals. Third key element is forbidden knowledge. And oftentimes in cosmic horror, characters pursue forbidden truth and they pay a steep price for doing so. Typically the punishments include losing touch with reality, going completely mad, or being outright destroyed. For example, in The Mist, the monsters are brought into our world as a result of a government project that focuses on discovering other dimensions. Scientists accidentally open up a doorway that connects the two worlds, and it dooms the inhabitants of a New England town. Fourth key element, an isolated setting. And in order to create an atmosphere of dread, put your characters in isolated settings where they have to face off against the powerful cosmic beings. Cut off your heroes from the rest of society and use the setting to stack the odds against them. And there are plenty of great examples of this, including the grocery store in The Mist, the Arctic Research Station in The Thing, and the farm in Color Out of Space. And the fifth key element is psychological breakdowns. When characters encounter the unknown, it can cause them to lose their sanity, abandon reason, and make terrible choices. And sometimes fear can turn people into monsters themselves. For example, in The Thing, the shapeshifter can mimic anyone it kills, and since anyone can be the enemy within this story, paranoia spreads throughout the camp. And as distrust and tension mount, people start attacking and killing one another. A similar thing happens in The Mist. The people trapped in the grocery store begin to disagree with each other, they disagree on how to handle the monsters that are outside, and before long, fear consumes them. Then they break off into different tribes before eventually warring against each other and spilling blood. Alright, now before we wrap up this video, I want to give you some tips for writing cosmic horror. I have 4 tips for you, and the first is to focus on themes first, then the monsters second. And what separates cosmic horror from other subgenres is how it explores humanity's place in the universe. And ideally, you want to create a scenario where your audience feels a sense of existential dread and despair. You want them to feel small, fragile, and outmatched by the unknown. Now, if you're writing a story and at first you focus on the monster, you may end up creating a more traditional horror story, which is totally fine, by the way. But if you are aiming to tell a cosmic horror story, you want to challenge the audience to think about their place in the universe. Think about that theme. Tip number 2, avoid happy and positive endings. As I mentioned, dread and despair are critical, so you'll want to end your stories by leaving the audience with a sense of powerlessness. Your heroes don't necessarily have to die or lose their minds, but you may want to shoot for a tragic ending, an ambiguous ending, or a bittersweet one. Tip number 3, leave unanswered questions. The unknown is unsafe and terrifying, so resist the urge to tie up all loose ends. This especially applies to your monsters and their motivations. Keep them mysterious even after the story concludes. And then tip number 4, find creative ways to describe the indescribable. I already talked about this a bit, but describing creatures from other worlds can be a challenge. Sometimes it helps to focus on parts of the creature rather than the whole. Other times you might want to use vivid metaphors to emphasize the creature's size, power, or strangeness. Finally, you might want to shift focus away from the creature itself and explore how it impacts your character's thoughts, feelings, and health. For example, the monsters in Bird Box are dangerous to look at. One look will kill a character. And not only is this terrifying, but it means there's no need to describe what the monsters look like. It's left up entirely to the audience's imagination. So I hope this helps. Question of the day, what's your favorite cosmic horror story? Let us know in the comments section below. Thank you for watching. If you want to support the channel, please pick up a copy of either one of my books and be sure to leave reviews on Amazon. Bad Parts is great if you like small town horror. It's about people trading away their sick and injured body parts in order to get healthy again. And then Entry Wounds is great if you like thrillers. It's about a guy who picks up a haunted gun and he can't put it down till he kills 6 people with it. Also, be sure to check out my other videos, like, share, and subscribe. And as always, remember to keep on writing.